The first sign was the silence. Not an empty silence, but a thick, heavy one that would fall over the house the second I walked into a room. My husband, Mark, and his mother, Helen, would be hunched over the kitchen table and their conversation would just stop. They'd look up with these plastic smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Just going over the household budget. Sweetheart," Helen would say, her voice sweet as poison. Mark would just nod, avoiding my gaze. I'd been married to Mark for 11 months. The first 6 were a fairy tale. The last 5 had been a slow, chilling descent into a nightmare I didn't understand. Helen had moved in with us 3 months ago, just to help out. She never left. Before we go any further, you need to subscribe. This story gets darker and more twisted than you can imagine. You're going to want to see how it ends. Now back to it. It was a Tuesday. Mark was at work. Helen was at her weekly book club, which I was starting to believe was a cover for something else. The house was mine. I decided to finally tackle the mess in the garage, a task Helen always insisted was her domain. I was moving a stack of old paint cans when I saw it, a small fireproof lockbox, shoved behind a dusty toolbox. I'd never seen it before. It was locked. My curiosity, a feeling I'd been trained to suppress, got the better of me. I found a crowbar. The lock gave way with a sharp crack. Inside there were no family heirlooms, no important documents. There was a new life insurance policy, a $2 million policy, taken out on me. The beneficiary was Mark. The effective date was 2 months ago. My blood ran cold. Beneath the policy was a notepad. I flipped through it. It looked like Helen's handwriting. Tight, controlled cursive. It wasn't a shopping list. Dose must be gradual. Mimics heart failure. Accident on stairs? Head trauma. Carbon monoxide in garage? Faulty water heater? It was a list of ways to kill me. I stood there in the cold, dusty garage, the papers shaking in my hands. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a plan, a detailed, cold-blooded plan. My husband and his mother were plotting my murder. I heard a car door slam outside. Helen was back early. Panic seized me. I shoved the papers back into the box, forced the lid shut, and slid it back into its hiding place. I was grabbing a random paint can when the side door to the garage opened. "What are you doing out here?" Helen asked, her eyes sharp, scanning the room. "Just trying to organize. Thought I'd finally paint the guest room," I stammered, holding up the can. Her gaze lingered on me for a moment too long. "Don't bother yourself with that, dear. I'll handle it. You look pale. Come inside." That night at dinner, the air was thicker than usual. Mark was quiet, shoveling food into his mouth. Helen watched me like a hawk. "You know, Sarah," Helen said, her voice syrupy, "I was thinking we should all go up to the lake house this weekend. It's so peaceful there. We could do some hiking." The lake house, isolated, surrounded by woods, steep cliffs overlooking the water. My appetite vanished. I pushed my food around my plate. I have a lot of work to do this weekend." "Nonsense," Mark said, his first words to me all evening. "You need a break. We're going. It's decided." The finality in his voice was a death sentence. The weekend at the lake house wasn't a vacation. It was the execution date. I went to the police the next day. I told a young, bored-looking officer everything. The insurance policy, the notes, the lake house. He listened, typing slowly. "Ma'am, do you have this lockbox with you?" "No, I put it back. I was afraid they'd know I found it." "I see. And these notes, you're sure they refer to you? Could they be plot ideas for a book?" "They're not plot ideas," I said, my voice rising. "My mother-in-law is not a writer. They're planning to kill me." He gave me a patronizing look. "Without physical evidence, there's nothing we can do. It's your word against theirs. My advice? If you feel unsafe, leave. Go stay with family." I had no family. That was part of the appeal for them. I realized I was alone. I walked out of the police station, the bright sun feeling obscene. The system couldn't help me. I was on my own. If I ran, they'd find me, or Mark would collect the insurance money anyway, claiming I'd just disappeared. I had to fight. But I couldn't fight them alone. I needed an army. I sat in my car, my mind racing, discarding one hopeless idea after another. And then I thought of him. Jake, my ex-boyfriend. The relationship had ended badly 2 years ago. He was intense, loyal to a fault, and ran with a group of guys who were resourceful, the kind of men you didn't want to cross. I had deleted his number, but I still remembered it. It was burned into my memory. It was a nuclear option, a desperate, dangerous gamble. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and dialed. It rang twice. Hello? His voice was deeper than I remembered, guarded. Jake? It's Sarah. A long pause. Sarah, to what do I owe the honor? The sarcasm was thick. I need your help, I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. It's life or death. My life, I heard him shift, the casual tone gone. Talk to me, and so I did. I told him everything. The insurance policy, the notes, the lake house, the police. I laid my nightmare bare for the man I'd left behind. When I finished, there was another silence. This one was different. It was the quiet of a predator focusing. Give me your address, he said, his voice now calm and lethally precise. Don't go to the lake house. Act normal. We'll handle the rest. I asked, me and the boys. Consider your problem our problem now. I gave him the address and hung up. I was terrified. I had just unleashed a force I might not be able to control. But for the first time in months, I wasn't feeling alone. My husband and his mother had planned to kill me. They thought I was an easy target. Their first mistake was underestimating me. Their second was forgetting who I used to know. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I moved through my house like a ghost, playing my part. I agreed to the lake house trip with a fake smile. I packed a bag. I acted the part of the oblivious wife. Meanwhile, Jake was working. He called me that night. We're set up across the street in a van, he said, his voice a low hum over the phone. We've got audio on the house. We see everything. You're not alone in there, Sarah. Remember that. Knowing they were out there was the only thing keeping me from screaming. The night before we were supposed to leave for the lake, I heard them. I was in the upstairs hallway, and their voices drifted up from the living room. They thought I was asleep. It has to look like an accident, Mark said, his voice strained. A fall. She's clumsy near the edge of the cliff. We were hiking. I turned my back for a second. It's the perfect place, Helen replied, her tone chillingly practical. No witnesses. We report her missing. They find her body days later. The terrain is rough. These things happen. I don't know if I can do it, Mom. You will, Mark. For us. For our future. She's a barrier. Once she's gone, the money is ours. We can finally be comfortable. You'll never have to struggle again. I crept back to my bedroom, my heart hammering. It was real. Hearing them say it out loud made it terrifyingly real. The next morning, we loaded the car. Helen was almost cheerful. Such a beautiful day for a hike. As we pulled out of the driveway, I saw it. A plain white panel van parked 2 houses down. I allowed myself a sliver of hope. Jake was following. The drive to the lake house was 2 hours of tense silence. When we arrived, the place was as isolated as I remembered. A single cabin perched on a wooded lot, with a steep, rocky path leading down to the water. We unpacked. Helen suggested we go for that hike immediately, before it gets too hot. This was it. Sure, I said, my voice barely a whisper. We started down the path. Mark walked ahead, his shoulders tense. Helen was right behind me, a little too close. The woods were dense. The only sounds are footsteps and the chirping of birds. Jake's voice echoed in my head. Stay on the path. We'll be there. Just get them to say it. We reached the cliff overlook. It was a stunning view of the lake, 100-foot drop to jagged rocks below. Beautiful, isn't it? Helen said, coming to stand beside me. Mark turned around. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a terrible conflict. Sarah, Now, Mark. Helen said, her voice losing its sweetness, becoming a command. This was the moment. I looked at my husband. You're really going to do this, Mark? You're going to push me off this cliff for money? His face crumpled. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. I understand that you're a murderer. I spat. Helen stepped toward me, her eyes blazing with hatred. You stupid girl. You were never good enough for him. You were a means to an end. And now you've reached the end? It was all on the record, every damning word. And then, from the trees, Jake emerged. Not just him. 3 of his friends. Big, silent men who moved with a purpose that sucked the air out of the clearing. They weren't holding guns, but they didn't need to. Their presence was a physical threat. Mark stumbled backward. What the hell? Helen let out a shrill cry. Who are you? Jake ignored them, his eyes on me. You okay, Sarah? I nodded, my legs trembling with relief. He then turned to Mark and Helen. His smile was cold. The audio is crystal clear. Conspiracy to commit murder. Solicitation to commit murder. You're done. One of Jake's friends, a man named Leo, held up a high-end digital recorder. Another, a tech whiz named Carlos, was holding a small video camera. They had it all. You set us up. Mark screamed at me, his face purple with rage. No, I said, finally finding my strength. You set yourselves up. I just gave you the rope. Helen launched herself at me, her fingers curled into claws. You bitch! She didn't get within 3 feet of me. Jake's other friend, a mountain of a man named Paul, caught her arm and held her effortlessly, her feet kicking at the air. It's over, Jake said, his voice flat. We're not the police. We're just the delivery boys. The evidence goes to the police. But first, we're going to have a little chat. The ride back to the city was silent. Mark and Helen were in their car, driven by Paul, who made it clear that any deviation from the route would be their last. Jake drove me in my car. We're taking them to an old warehouse we use, he explained calmly. We need to get a full, uninterrupted confession on video, the kind the cops can use. They're scared enough now to talk. And if they don't? I asked. He just looked at me. They will. The warehouse was a clean but sparse industrial space. Jake and his friends sat Mark and Helen down in separate rooms. I watched on a monitor as Jake, playing the role of the calm, rational interrogator, laid out the evidence for Mark. We have the insurance policy. We have the notes. We have the audio from the cliff. A jury will put you away for life. But maybe we can talk about the difference between life in prison and a shorter sentence. It all depends on who the DA thinks was the mastermind. It was a classic technique, and it worked. Terrified and broken, Mark started talking. He blamed his mother. He said it was all her idea, that she pressured him, that he never wanted to go through with it. In the other room, Carlos was doing the same thing with Helen. She, in turn, blamed Mark, calling him weak and greedy, saying he came to her with the plan. They were turning on each other. It was everything I could have hoped for. After 3 hours, they had 2 full, detailed, and contradictory confessions. They had dug their own legal graves. Jake handed me a thumb drive. This is everything. All the audio, the video from the cliff, the separate confessions. It's a prosecutor's dream. What happens now? I asked, clutching the drive like a lifeline. Now, he said. We drop them off at the police station, and you hand that to the detective in charge. We'll be ghosts, and that's exactly what we did. Paul and Leo drove a silent, shell-shocked Mark and Helen to the steps of the police department. I walked in right behind them and asked for the detective who had brushed me off before. His expression was very different this time when I placed the thumb drive in his hand. What's this? Evidence, I said, of a conspiracy to murder me. The perpetrators are right there. I pointed to Mark and Helen, who were being detained by uniformed officers, their heads bowed. I walked out of the police station a free woman. The nightmare was over. I turned to thank Jake, but he and his friends were already gone, vanished back into the shadows from which they came. My husband and his mother had planned to kill me. They had the motive, the means, and the opportunity. But they made one fatal error. They forgot that the quietest prey often has the deadliest allies. The legal process was a slow, grinding machine, but it was turning in my favor. Mark and Helen were denied bail, deemed a flight risk and a danger to the victim. Me. I moved out of the house we shared, rented a small apartment, and started the process of filing for divorce. Their confessions, caught on video, were the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Their lawyers, seeing the insurmountable evidence, tried to broker a plea deal. Mark, desperate to save himself, agreed to testify against his mother in exchange for a reduced sentence of 25 years to life. He painted her as the mastermind, the puppeteer who pulled his strings. Helen, however, remained defiant. She fired her court-appointed lawyer and vowed to fight the charges, claiming she and Mark were the victims of an elaborate setup by a criminally connected ex-lover. I didn't care. The world now knew them for what they were. The media had a field day. Black Widow mother and son plot. The headlines read. Their faces were plastered everywhere. I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. 3 weeks before the trial was set to begin, I came home to my new apartment. The door was unlocked. A cold dread washed over me. I always locked it. Always. I pushed it open slowly. The place was trashed. Cushions slashed. Drawers pulled out. Contents strewn across the floor. And on the wall, written in what looked like red lipstick, was a message. Stop the trial or you die. Helen. She had someone on the outside, an accomplice. My blood ran cold. The system had them, but their reach was longer than I thought. I called the detective. He sent a forensics team, but they found nothing. No fingerprints, no usable evidence. It was a ghost. The fear was back, a living thing in my apartment. I couldn't sleep. Every noise was an intruder. That's when my phone rang. A blocked number. I answered, my hand trembling. Hello? Did you get my message? It was Helen's voice, filtered through a voice changer. But the cadence was unmistakably hers. The trial doesn't happen. You drop the charges. You tell the DA you made it all up. Or the next visit won't be so polite. The line went dead. They had me cornered again. The police couldn't protect me 24/7. I was alone. No, not alone. I had one more card to play. A card I had hoped to leave in the deck. I called Jake. He listened silently as I told him about the break-in, the message, the call. She's connected. I finished, my voice shaking. She has someone helping her. The police can't stop it. Give me 12 hours, Jake said, his voice a low growl. Don't go home. Check into a hotel. Don't use your credit card. Pay cash. I did as he said. I spent a sleepless night in a cheap motel room, jumping at every sound. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Jake, problem handled. The pipeline is dry. You're safe. I didn't know what that meant, and I was too afraid to ask. But the feeling of being watched, of imminent danger, was gone. The air felt clear again. Later, I found out through the detective. Helen's one remaining ally on the outside, a crooked cousin who had done her dirty work for years, had been arrested in a separate, unrelated raid. A massive amount of stolen property was found in his home. He would be going away for a long, long time. His lawyer claimed it was a setup, that the evidence was planted. I knew better. The trial proceeded, with her outside help severed and her son testifying against her. Helen's defense crumbled. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found her guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation to commit murder, and witness intimidation. At the sentencing hearing, she was allowed to make a statement. She stood, dressed in a cheap prison jumpsuit, all her former poise gone. She turned and looked directly at me, her eyes burning with pure, undiluted hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed at me. "I have friends you can't even imagine. You'll never be safe. Never." The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As they led her away, she was still screaming my name. Mark was sentenced a week later. 25 years to life. He looked broken, a hollowed-out shell of the man I had married. He didn't look at me. It was finally, truly over. A month later, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a single unmarked USB drive. I plugged it into my computer with a sense of dread. It was a video file. It showed Helen in the prison common room, talking to another inmate. The audio was clear. "My son, the weak little fool," Helen was saying. "But I'm not finished. I have people. It might take years, but she'll get what's coming to her. No one crosses me." The video ended. It was insurance, a guarantee that if anything ever happened to me, this video would find its way to the authorities, and Helen would never see the light of day again. I didn't know who sent it. I had my suspicions. I deleted the file and destroyed the drive. I didn't need it. I had won. My husband and his mother planned to kill me. They thought their bond was unbreakable, their plan foolproof. But they made a fatal miscalculation. They thought the only dangerous people were the ones like them. They never considered that a woman alone could call upon a different kind of family, a family that operates in the shadows, that plays by its own rules, and that always, always settles its debts. I had beaten them at their own game by changing the rules, and I had survived.